What if COVID-19 were a Trojan horse designed to shred our constitution, implement a global surveillance system, introduce and familiarize the population with virtual doctors and medicine, self-driving cars and virtual currency, doing away with paper money altogether? Does it sound like a frightening science fiction novel to you? Well, it may hold more clues than you'd wish to know about. We'll explore this and more in today's video.
穿橙色衣服的先生，请您把口罩戴好，把口罩戴好，谢谢。
你好，我是防疫机器人安学士，目前正在进行环境。
您好，欢迎来到电视医生节目。
欢迎戴口罩，
戴口罩，
我们都必须要戴口罩。
您37度3的话，可以去发热门诊。
We take you to China, where a battle is quietly brewing between the US and China's artificial intelligence ambitions. Chinese Asia's Jeremy Cohen takes a closer look at what some say is the coming AI Cold War.
This is a table tennis training session with a twist. His sparring partner is not a human, but an elaborate machine which uses artificial intelligence for serves and returns. It's developed by China's largest robotic company Sinsong and the China Table Tennis Academy.
因为陪练的话，有时候会用一些发球机嘛，但是我觉得发球机它有时候就跟实战的话结合稍微差一点，但是这种机器人的话，我觉得它可以这个动作模拟真人的话比较像一点，所以说它更接近于实战吧，做陪练的话。
This is just one example of how investments in the digital sector are changing how people live, work and play in China. President Xi Jinping has repeatedly stressed the necessity of promoting scientific and technological innovations in government reform, and this includes areas like big data as well as artificial intelligence. China's goal is to foster a $1 trillion AI industry by 2030, and today it's home to tech giants like Alibaba, Tencent and Baidu. But China's dazzling AI advances is increasingly seen as a threat to the United States. To combat that threat, the Trump administration has announced tariffs targeting industries key to China's digital push: aerospace, automobiles, information technology, and robots.
AI fundamentally is used to increase productivity and maximize efficiency. So whichever country has a wide application of AI technology will have an edge over its competitors. And in terms of geopolitics, I would say AI will have its largest impact on economic development.
Is it possible that Americans are being asked to stay indoors to get them accustomed to the new normal heading our way that all of these governors keep talking about?
We're weeks away from going into a new strategy and a new reality, but it's predicated on people continuing to stay the course.
Are the empty hospitals, some of which will never reopen, the furloughed doctors and nurses, preparing each of us to get that medical diagnosis on our laptops? A recent Newsweek article by Rick Jackson, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Jackson Healthcare, the third largest healthcare staffing company in the United States, comes with the headline, "Most hospitals are empty. Soon they might be closed for good." The article mentions how the industry shed 43,000 healthcare workers in just the first month of the coronavirus, expecting equal or greater layoffs this month. Sounds a bit suspect, doesn't it? Will we be moving toward automated cars, and will legislation maybe be passed banning the use of legacy cars, untrustworthy with that biological being commandeering it? It's scary stuff. Here's an advertisement for it from the International Telecommunication Union. In the midst of COVID-19, where are the driverless cars? The COVID-19 crisis has reignited debates on the rapid deployment of autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles can protect transportation workers and provide contact-free delivery. But while transport worker health would benefit from this, there are technical and regulatory barriers. to reaching the full potential of autonomous vehicles, and humans are still required to load and unload vehicles, shifting risk of infection to staff and customers. These are among the many factors the driverless car community must discuss in order to realize our self-driving future.
Going into a new strategy and a new reality.
Are we told to not exchange cash money during this pandemic due to science, or because we want to transition to a purely digital economy?
Concerns over coronavirus, well, they've created intense swings in financial markets. But I'm talking about greenbacks, the cash in your wallet. We touch it, we pass it between people. Some people even lick their fingers as they count it. Is that a problem?
Viewers from Plymouth to Grosse Pointe ask, can you get coronavirus from handling money? The answer is, we don't know, but it's worth thinking about. Since mid-February, the Bank of China has been either destroying bills or disinfecting their cash with ultraviolet light and high temperatures, then storing it for 7 to 14 days before re-releasing it back into the circulation. That is based on studies that have shown bacteria and viruses can survive on money. Now, there is no study that shows the COVID-19 virus can survive on cash. However, an unidentified representative from the World Health Organization reportedly told a British newspaper that cash could be contributing to the spread of COVID-19. Now, the U.S. Treasury has not made any statement on U.S. currency. Until this issue is properly studied, I would recommend a common sense approach. Where possible, use cashless options. When you do handle cash, wash your hands or use hand sanitizer afterward, especially if you're about to handle food.
Will robots be replacing the workers who lost all of their jobs, now dependent on a nanny state to keep them afloat? It all certainly sounds like an Orwellian nightmare.
All over the world, Amazon is building giant delivery facilities, which it calls fulfillment centers, where traditional warehouses have static rows of shelving with staff walking back and forth. Here it's the shelves which do the walking.
Oh, it's such a cheery sound. The beautiful echo of human jobs disappearing so that they might go on welfare before, of course, our Georgia Guidestones agenda is implemented and we head to that Denver airport for a season.
Behold, the Georgia Guidestones. These granite monoliths mysteriously appeared about 40 years ago. And if you're thinking aliens or a cult or even the 10 Commandments, well, you're not the only one. Just ask this guy.
And you take pictures of it, you get a blue orb. When you put your head down in there like this and look through it, ball of energy comes through that sucker, man.
These standing stones are enormous and made of solid granite. When you're near them, they are genuinely impressive and imposing, the sort of thing that makes you wonder how ancient people ever managed to raise them up and to place them so precisely that they act as an astronomical calendar. I don't normally speculate like this in videos, but these stones inspire some pretty good stories. And some pretty bad ones, too. Because, like I said, if you wanted to inflame conspiracy theorists, building a modern Stonehenge that acts as an astronomical calendar with 10 commandments inscribed upon it, one of which says that you should guide reproduction wisely, and another that says it'd be a really good idea to have a world population under 10% of what it currently is.
We were at one of these meetings yesterday, and I remember that a lady told you that she had had 8 children, and 4 of them had died in childbirth, or shortly thereafter. But if all of them had survived, she'd have 8 children. And what the developing world does not need is more children.
And I think that was the biggest aha to Bill and me when we got into this work, is we asked ourselves, of course, the same hard-nosed question you'd ask, which is, if you get into this work and you start to save these children, will women just keep overpopulating the world? And thank goodness the converse is absolutely true. So they don't do that, because women say to themselves they want 2 children to survive into adulthood. If she knows that 2 will survive into adulthood, she will naturally bring down her population.
Well, I think on the one hand it is true. AI will not have true emotion and won't appeal to people, but the process of doing taxes will absolutely 80% be done by machines. The humans will be displaced in the next probably 5 years, maybe 10.
Special guest with us, she's a former writer and contributor for Mint Press News, as well as the new writer and researcher for The Last American Vagabond. She's here today to talk about her new piece that was released just moments ago. It's called Techno-Tyranny, How the U.S. National Security State is Using Coronavirus to Fulfill an Orwellian Vision. Please welcome Whitney Webb. Hi, Whitney. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's great to be here.
I'm glad that you're on the show today, Whitney, because you just wrote this article, and let me just show the tweets that you made, and then we'll get to you so you can walk us through this. You tweeted out, last May, a government organization outlined an extremely Orwellian vision for what the United States must do to win the quote-unquote tech war against China in artificial intelligence. It essentially called to remake the entire American economy and society. Now, thanks to COVID-19, their vision is taking shape.
Well, the agency is called the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. It's chaired by Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google's parent company, Alphabet. And yeah. And the vice chair is the former Deputy Secretary of Defense. He currently works at Center for a New American Security, which is a think tank that's led by John McCain's former foreign policy advisor.
Here, I'm Richard Fontaine, president of the Center for New American Security. And we're really excited this morning to bring everybody together around this set of issues where artificial intelligence and national security issues and matters coincide. You know, President Putin of Russia recently said that the country that leads in artificial intelligence will rule the world.
And Joe Biden's former national security advisor. So it's a great crowd. Beyond those two guys, it's also full of In-Q-Tel, the first CEO of In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm, as well as the current CEO of In-Q-Tel, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, pretty much all of Silicon Valley, Oracle as well. It's and a bunch of people that also used to be on the Pentagon. It's basically the military, the intelligence community, and Silicon Valley all coming together, creating this roadmap for what the U.S. needs to do in order to avoid losing what it says is its technological advantage over China and artificial intelligence. And they refer to this, that they call this the fourth industrial revolution that artificial intelligence is going to create. They created this roadmap. It's in a presentation that was created last May. And it was recently obtained by a Freedom of Information Act request by EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center.
What is it called again?
There was a batch of documents in this Freedom of Information Act request. So the document that I'm talking about is called Chinese Tech Landscape Overview. And what they do there is they talk about where China has advantage and how the U.S. can overcome that advantage. And they basically say that the U.S. right now still is leading in the creation stage of these AI technologies, but it's lagging behind China in the adoption stage. And if we don't come up, meet China in the adoption stage, then we will lag behind, and then China will dominate AI for the rest of our lifetimes. That's what it says. And that means that China will export AI around the world and the U.S. will not. So not only will Silicon Valley's bottom lines be hurt forever, but then the Pentagon and the CIA lose their technology advantage over China. And they've been freaking out about this for years. The military and the intelligence community made a joint center to address this issue specifically about China and AI a couple of years ago, and now this committee was created by one of the last NDAAs to address it even further. I mean, they are freaking out that China may overtake us in AI. And anyway, a lot of the stuff they lay out that needs to be done is happening right now, thanks to the current pandemic crisis. And it's very disturbing.
And so how would they reshape our economy to do this?
Okay, so what they identify as these obstacles, they say they're structural obstacles in American society and the economy. They say that the reason that the U.S. lags behind China is because of several things. They say that in China there's a lack of what they call legacy systems that exist in the United States. And those legacy systems, I honestly found really creepy. They include things like individual car ownership, being able to see a doctor in person, like a human doctor in person, and and a whole bunch of other things. It's privacy laws, basically, FDA approval.
What are they doing with private doctor visits, and what are you saying is happening?
Okay, so with private doctor visits, they say that in China, there is not enough doctors for the entire population, and that is causing China to adopt AI medicine platforms faster than the US, right? And so they call that, in the US, the fact that there's enough human doctors per the population, they call that a legacy system, and they say that has to change.
Oh.
This is last May.
This is what our governmental agency is saying, that we need to change the way we deliver medicine?
They're saying that we need to adopt AI for pretty much every sector in the economy, and that medicine and healthcare is one of them. And this was even before any of this stuff with coronavirus happened.
Make it make sense.
Where we've seen this explosion in telemedicine and AI medical analysis software and all of this stuff. They were promoting this then, and they were saying that a lot of these changes they were asking for would be unfathomable in the West. This is the intelligence community, the military, and Silicon Valley, all of whom are fundamentally untrustworthy actors if you look at their history. I think one of the main reasons why we're seeing so much of this happen now is that there is a huge amount of overlap on this National Security Commission and Trump's new economic revival task force and a lot of the CEOs advising him. All of the Silicon Valley companies on this National Security Commission are on Trump's economic revival committee. And, the Trump administration also developed this artificial intelligence policy over the past couple of years that talks directly about closing this technology gap with China. And they have an AI plan for the American worker and for American industry that has gotten very little media scrutiny. And, this is the commission that is going to set the recommendations, the official recommendations for how the U.S. government does that. Removing these obstacles, finding some sort of event that allows these structural changes to take place, right? I mean, remember, this is from May 2019, so this is like a roadmap,
right?
Essentially, what they lay out for what we have to do to close that gap, right? In terms of what they're doing now, there's a lot of overlap, but I honestly think, this type of, solution to coronavirus that they're promoting here, I don't really think it's about fighting the pandemic. I think it's about control. A lot of these programs that are being promoted, including mass surveillance, for example, in order to increase our, capacity to be better at AI or whatever. So basically, coronavirus, with coronavirus, these mass surveillance solutions have been shown to actually hinder coronavirus response. And the first country that implemented these mass surveillance solutions, which was Israel, and Israeli doctors basically asked Shin Bet, which is like Israel's FBI, to stop doing it because it was hindering response. They have something they want to implement, they have something they want to do, and then they're moving the justification from whatever Americans are most afraid of at the time. So last fall it was mass shootings, and now it's coronavirus. This is something that even people in U.S. government have openly admitted at times, like Rahm Emanuel, who was Obama's former chief of staff. He said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And this is something the U.S. government has done on numerous occasions, including 9/11, for example, where we were told the Patriot Act would make us safer.
Right. And so let's talk about this surveillance and why does it make it actually harder to contain coronavirus with this kind of mass surveillance like this?
So this mass surveillance specifically is about contact tracing, and this Israeli Doctor Association said it was giving them not the information they needed to combat the pandemic, but it is information that serves the national security state in Israel and also in other places that have national security states that act in similar ways, right? It's about tracking people.
Do you think there's an overarching purpose for them to be instituting this kind of surveillance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mass surveillance system in the U.S. has been ever expanding. The U.S. government has been mass surveilling us since 9/11, but they had to do it sort of secretly, right? Because we still have privacy laws, and even though they violate them in public, in order to bring about this fourth industrial revolution, they had to be able to do it more openly and more extensively by partnering more directly with the private sector in these ways. And this is something this document calls for: more explicit public-private partnerships where Silicon Valley companies cannot say no to what the government asks them to do.
Do you think Trump will use this crisis to try to get rid of in-person shopping and to maybe push driverless vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's already happening because of the coronavirus crisis. There have been DMV approvals of driverless cars by 2 companies in California, and they specifically cited the coronavirus crisis as a means to expedite that. And a lot of these CEOs of these companies say things like humans are biohazards, machines are not. So this is the future, and they say this is a permanent shift, not a fleeting shift, and that long after coronavirus, driverless cars will be here to stay, as an example. It's also true for in-person shopping. They're saying that people will get used to this. One of the things it promotes, because China largely does this, is relying almost exclusively on online shopping. It says when shopping online is the only way to get what you want, consumers go online.
As a result of going up 70% this year, you have become the wealthiest man in the world. Is that a title that you really wanted, or not? Is it a
I can
burden?
assure you I have never sought that title.
Amazon's net sales increased by 26% year-on-year to $75 billion in the first quarter of 2020, led by the surge in demand as people stayed home owing to the global pandemic.
But it does talk about eliminating cash, eliminating credit and debit cards, going to smartphone, mobile payments as an example. And we've sort of seen with this crisis too, like people saying we can't use cash because it might carry the virus. Pretty much all of the structural obstacles they talk about are being, magically disappearing thanks to coronavirus.
What would you say regular people would be most shocked at to read in this document?
That's a little hard because a lot of things in this shocked me. They basically talked about how one quote they had that I found really disturbing was that, like, in the US and Europe, people are scared of AI, that it might take our jobs and erode our privacy, but China views it as a tool for global leadership. Honestly, if you actually think about what AI will do, yeah, it's going to mean a lot of job loss, and yeah, it's going to mean a huge erosion of privacy if we implement these mass surveillance systems. But those are things that ostensibly, are important, right? But they're saying, no, we need to do this in order to overcome this technological advantage. But there's nothing here about like making life easier for regular Americans. This is all about how to help the bottom line of Silicon Valley and how to maintain, the national security edge in technology over China. I mean, FDA approval, they say, is a legacy system. The mass use of facial recognition is a huge part of what they talk about in this document from last year, that it needs to be adopted on a huge scale. But again, they cite privacy laws, but they say things like streets carpeted and cameras is really good infrastructure. Using civilian databases of their faces is a killer way to train artificial intelligence.
We live in an unconstitutional warrantless surveillance state, and no one gives a shit. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Barack Obama repealed habeas corpus, Section 1021 of the NDAA. Nobody cares. There's no now, and then they hand all those powers off to Trump. Not only that, but they expand Trump's spying powers, and they all vote for it. Who do you mean they all? I mean the squad, every progressive in Congress, they all vote for it.
And this coronavirus relief bill, right? This was $4 trillion, right, that went to Wall Street and to bail out all of these big companies that are going to take huge market shares of American business, smaller and middle-sized American businesses. I mean, how is that not like a way to remake the economy by making sure all the bailout money goes to people on the top so that these giant corporations can basically do whatever they want and have control over the economy? And if you look at Trump's new task force, which he calls the Great American Economic Revival Industry Groups, it's full of these hedge fund managers like Paul Singer, the world's most notorious vulture capitalist.
Billionaire activist investor Paul Singer has been called the vulture lord and a bloodsucker by the former Argentine president Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. He's also been labelled a raider and a profiteer. He's feared the world over for hostile boardroom takeovers and profiting from debt-laden countries. He's so powerful, he brought Argentina to its knees and set off a chain of events that led to the impeachment of South Korea's president in 2017.
Sheldon Adelson, Trump's biggest political donor.
You may not know him by name, but gambling magnate Sheldon Adelson is one of the largest Republican donors in the 2012 election. A new investigation finds Adelson may have violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by paying a Macau lawyer hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It has members of this same National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence on it, like Safra Catz, who's the CEO of Oracle. And I mean, what do you think these people are going to do? Do you think they're going to help out regular Americans or help out their business? Jeff Bezos is on this task force.
Oh,
and he's
come
always
on.
talked about Amazon. implementing AI and replacing warehouse workers with AI, the robots and all of this stuff. I mean, what do you think he's going to do during this crisis? You think he's going to rehire people? These people are calling humans biohazards. We have to move to machines so we don't get sick, right? To me, that seems like they're taking a huge advantage here in this crisis by trying to play off of the fear and panic about what's going on and trying to get us to basically give up the way of, our way of life, basically, and let them implement all this AI stuff so they can beat China in the what they call the technology wars. I mean, that's essentially what they're trying to do.
Would you have any insight into the effectiveness of any of this, and will we be able to win an AI war with China, and how important is it for workers?
Well, they think we'll be able to win if we remove what they refer to these structural obstacles, which are these legacy systems that government spends more money on AI and removes existing regulations on privacy laws and other things that will allow us to leapfrog China and stop lagging behind them in the adoption phase. And they basically want us to adopt AI-driven technologies in every sector across the board. But how much do you have to pay a robot? How much do you have to pay artificial intelligence? Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, I mean, what do you think he's going to do? Care about the little guy and be like, no, you know what? Our bottom line doesn't matter as much as employing the workers we had before the coronavirus crisis. They're going to say, well, you know what? You were in lockdown and we were fine because we implemented robots and we don't need you.
So this task force, does it have a name? Do you know of?
Yeah, it's called the Great American Economic Revival Industry Groups. They say that the health and wealth of America is the primary goal, and these groups will produce a more independent, self-sufficient, and resilient nation. That's from the White House press release.
So who appointed people to this task force? Do you know?
It was the White House.
So they put Jeff Bezos, Trump's number one nemesis, on a task force for the economy?
Right. So nemesis, I would argue, is more of a public thing. These oligarchs, they're all in the same club. There's the people at the very top and then there's the people at the bottom. They may have their public disagreements, but at the end of the day, most billionaires in America want to hold onto their power and they don't want to share it with the rest of American society.
If you're a QAnon follower out there, you're queuing up to shame me in the comments and tell us how Trump is God's anointed one, that the Holy Spirit is poured out over him and he only pretends to be an insider while working behind the scenes to make massive arrests of people while cleaning up Washington. Q is for the truther who cares not for the truth, who only wants their political biases affirmed. They're brainwashed. It's not based in reality. According to the Q community, the deceased John F. Kennedy Jr. is the author of the message board posts, and he works behind the scenes with Donald Trump to liberate hundreds of thousands of human trafficking victims. If this were true, you'd be seeing social media posts of families being reunited with their long-lost children. There would be no ability to suppress 35,000 children being discovered in underground tunnels. To the QAnon community, it's time to actually want the truth. You're delusional, speaking of Donald Trump as though he were the son of man himself. It's stupid.
Is Donald Trump basically the king of Israel? So that's how a radio host referred to the president today, and Trump quoted his remarks in a series of tweets this morning. The president thanking Wayne Allen Root for calling him, quote, the greatest president for Jews and Israel, and also for saying that, quote, they love him, Trump, like he's the second coming of God.
See, I think he's going after what he said he would do. I think he's meeting with a lot of resistance.
I love that he's America first. I love that he's not a politician. You know, for so long, we've had politicians promising us stuff. The swamp is horrible. And Trump is there. He's there for the small guy. If Jesus Christ gets down off the cross and told me Trump is with Russia, I would tell him, hold on a second. I need to check with the president if it's true.
So I've been thinking a lot about this one lately. Why would they want to replace us with robots? Do they actually foresee a sustainable economy without enough consumers who have the money? Do these mammon worshippers want to pay us with the kind of welfare so that we can continue to buy their products? That doesn't seem plausible. Any economist who has thought that one through would see how unsustainable it is. So why? I think they are planning to replace us because they'll still want to continue to innovate and they'll need their luxuries and goods. They just need something to make them, something being the key, not someone. Rather than having to look at a blue-collar janitor or assembly lineman, they'll just have robots and rid themselves of the rest of us biohazardous flesh beings that they currently have to occupy the world with.
For now, the United States is still where the bulk of AI innovations are taking place. Back in 2016, a US government report warned that China has already surpassed the United States, at least in terms of journal articles that mention deep learning or deep neural network.
因为它确实发展的非常快，而且我们有个先天的优势，就是跟欧美不一样的，虽然说他们的这个底子是非常 solid， 我们有一个先天的优势，因为我们是一个足够大的一个市场，所以我们其实可以去做一个闭环的测试，就是我们不需要走到国外去，我们直接可以在本地去落地的，有足够的市场，有足够的资金。
The stakes are too high for either country to let their guards down. The development of AI is expected to bring about the fourth industrial revolution. For the United States, losing its lead in artificial intelligence could very well mean losing its economic supremacy eventually. As for China, it wouldn't want to see a hard-to-come-by opportunity to reign supreme again slip through its grasp.
The devil? Well, the devil is always in the details. God bless you all in Jesus' mighty name.